Thanks for being here. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Yesh and John. I'm joined by some wonderful attorneys today. For everyone watching us live, today we'll be having a great conversation about green cards through marriage. However, if your topic does not cover that specific visa and immigration path, please feel free to still ask your questions and our attorneys will answer them. With that being said, let me give the mic over to Attorney Veely today. How are you doing, John?
Doing great, Pierre. Thanks. It's
Wonderful.
good to be here
Why
with
don't
us.
we cover, John, a little bit about how the marriage path works? Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about it, and then we'll bring in Yesh because I know she's the expert
Sure.
later on in the conversation.
Okay. Well, so the marriage green card is in some ways the simplest of visas because it has one issue, being married to a United States citizen, right? And but that's different than being married to a green card holder. That's a different category and not immediate. What I mean by immediate is if you're married to a U.S. citizen, you can file for the adjustment of status if you're in the U.S. at the same time as filing the I-130 form. Uh, the elements of proving it are, um, while simple, open to a lot of investigation or I guess a hard eye. And the reason is because there's a lot of fraud because it's only one issue, right? So people that are not really married or pretending to have a relationship will try to use this visa, and that's why USCIS has interviews, and in those interviews they are going to listen to your language and they're looking to look at your body language, and they're trained to try to see if somebody is lying about this relationship. And so they'll ask all sorts of questions, and they'll look for documents and things like that. So we call the documents that we present in a marriage to a U.S. citizen case bona fides, because you have to prove it's a bona fide marriage. So let me give you some examples of bona fides, and maybe Yesh and Ashley can jump in. But bona fides are the documents that indicate the legal relationship between two people, right? And this relationship can consist of same sex marriages now, and that has been a fairly recent phenomenon. That I've been practicing law for 30 years. It did not was not a possibility at the beginning of my career, but I remember doing my first same sex marriage in Colorado, and they work fine now. There's no issues around that. But you still have to prove that you're really married, and so how do you do that? So the bona fides are what people have in a typical marriage, right? And not every marriage is typical, but typical marriages, the husband and wife live together. You don't have to. There's no regulation that you do, and we've had a number of instances where people don't. But when they live together, it's not a bad idea to get on the lease together. You're usually legally bound for your husband or wife anyway, so getting on the lease with them, adding your name to the lease is a good idea to pick up a fairly easy bona fide. If there's a mortgage that somebody owns, it's not so easy at that point, because you may not want to couple that or pull that piece of property into the marriage for to be a marital asset, right? It could be a really big thing if you inherited the home or you're bringing a home into the marriage, depending on your state. That might be able to remain your own sole property as becoming part of your wife or husband's property. So you may not want to put that in there. So you keep that separately, and that's all right. But receiving mail at that property, even if you're not a owner of the property, is another way to show that people reside together, right? And so if they're both receiving mail for their bills and other things at the same address, then that's a bona fide, right? Those are things that you can do. So there's all sorts of other things that you could do, even if you didn't share the ownership of that property. You could share the liability for the utilities, right? The cable bill, the
Mm,
water, phone bill, if you have a phone bill anymore. That kind of dates me a little bit. Those sorts of things. You could have the same account or one of the same accounts. So maybe you're like my wife and I. We don't have the same checking account. It would I'm not responsible enough for not bouncing it all the time if we did that, right? So we have our own checking accounts, but we have a joint savings account, right? And we have an additional checking account we call the house account, where we put money in from our respective accounts to cover costs at our house together. So we're sharing that. So those are things, right? And investment accounts can be in both names. So just a few of the different things. Other items that help in married to U.S. citizens to prove can be a letter from pillars in the community. What does that mean? So those are respected people that know both you and your spouse as a marital unit, and that can be maybe somebody from your religious organization. That could be an employer of one or both of you. It's a really good idea because if your bosses, if you have bosses, know each other, know of your spouse, they can write to that. People in organizations, just people with standing in the community. Maybe they're elected officials, maybe they're somewhat celebrities. I don't know, but things like that of people that they can show that are important. Showing membership in organizations together. Again, if it's a religious organization or a club that you're in, or whatever it may be, if you're both in it, pictures of that, showing membership in that. Those are all elements that can be, provided at the initial filing, and then later elements of it brought to the interview. And also at the interview, they love pictures. So let me tell you a little bit about pictures. You shouldn't have all the pictures from one event, right? Here's all the pictures from our wedding. Hit 200 pictures of one place, one change of clothes. They should be from various things over time, visiting places together, trips, right? Because that takes money to have to go on a vacation, and people that are faking a green card wouldn't do that typically. Pictures with other people, like family members, right? Family members, friends, other folks, showing that you have this relationship out in the world. It's not this secretive fake thing. Those are the types of things that USCIS likes to see to help prove the validity of a marriage. So I think I've kind of gone on a little bit about bona fides and how to prove that up. If Pierre, if you want to jump it into a different direction or get some feedback,
Yeah,
Ashley.
absolutely. So there are some key questions that we'll ask today. Um, is there any situation where USCIS will deny your green card application or your visa because of that they think that it's not authentic? I'll rephrase that question.
Yeah,
Will USCIS in any situation deny you thinking that it's a fake, made up marriage?
100%. That's why they do it. I mean, the whole purpose of the interview is to see if it's fake, right? I guess you could say that conversely, see if it's real. But what they're looking for and why they're asking questions is to see if something prompts something that gives them a reason to believe that this is not a bona fide marriage, right? And there's all sorts of factors that can go into that. Then sometimes they may jump to a conclusion that it isn't authentic, even if it is, right? I can tell you an example of one that we had years ago where a longtime client of ours had a Cambodian restaurant, very fancy Cambodian restaurant, by the way. And he his niece came to visit and stay with him for a while, and she came in around the first of that year. She got married to a low level employee of this restaurant on Valentine's Day. So if you do the math, that's 1.5 months later, married, right? When we went to the interview, he didn't have any pictures because he said it was against his religion to take pictures. So here we have a guy marrying his boss's niece a month and a half after he meets her, and won't take any pictures. So there's no pictures of the wedding or anything there. And I can tell you the expression on the face of the adjudicator was, I don't know about this. Now they didn't just say it was fake, but what they did is like 4 or 5 days later, they knock on their door at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they're both there, right? Married and happy and all that sort of stuff. And they said, "Oh, okay, you're really married," and they gave them their green card. And sometimes what appears to be fake or just doesn't make a lot of sense isn't fake, right? I
Right.
mean, these people were truly married, and you know, and got their green card because of it. So now, once you're married, because there was a lot of fraud and people getting divorced literally the day after, right? There's a movie called Green Card with George Depardieu, I think is his name, a French guy. That it's all about a fake green card in New York City for a French guy, and I think they got divorced the day after it, even though they may have been in love. I can't remember the movie exactly, but a lot of that happened. So a number of years ago, and it's been a while now. They say you have to stay married, and it's a conditional green card. The first green card you get has a condition. Now it works as a green card, right? And your days counting to become a citizen count from that day, and you can actually file your citizenship before you have your conditions removed, because if you're married to a U.S. citizen, you only have to wait 3 years to become a citizen of the United States. Whereas if you get any other type of green card, you have to wait 5, right? And so, but you have to have those conditions removed, and that shows that you're still been married for 2 years, and you have another interview, and you send them more bona fides to say you continued to do the things, hold yourself out as a married couple, and file taxes together, and all those sort of things, right? And so that's really interesting. And when those conditions are removed, now you have a regular green card, and you can, if you want to, apply for citizenship.
Excellent. Oh wow. And John, if I want to ask a follow-up question about that conversation, how will the time count? So let's say if a couple is married for 5 years, but
Yeah.
they've never filed for
Mhm.
anything yet, immigration wise, do all these 5 years count into place, or do we still have
Yeah.
to restart the clock in every aspect?
Yes. Do you want to answer that one? You got that one? Is she there? You're on mute. Yes, if you're.
Yeah. Yes, you're
In
on
any
mute.
case, if she's not there, you can count that, right? So if you've been married, the time you've been married can count towards the conditional green card elements.
Very well. And then when it comes to green cards and the marriage situation there, I'm assuming that you have to live in the U.S. Obviously, you can't marry someone that is in a whole foreign country and start the process there, or can you? That would
Absolutely,
be
you
called a
can.
fiance.
In both instances of that. So the American can be in America while his or her spouse is overseas. That happens a lot. And then the spouse has to go into the interview by themselves. And look, those are highly scrutinized scenarios because of mail order bride sort of scams if they're not real. But mail order brides, using that term, I'm not sure if that's offensive or not, and I apologize if I am, but that concept is meeting your bride over the internet or whatever, can be a legitimate thing also, right? It's not illegal to meet somebody in any way you meet them, but you have to go over and visit them. You have to have a relationship in person at some point before you file for that. And also the same with a K1 visa, which is where you bring over a fiance and then marry them within 90 days. You have to go over and see them. So it can't just be merely online. There has to be have had at least one visit and within 2 years before.
Now, another really good question is, can you, as our attorney, attend the USCIS interview with us? Can you come into the interview with us that
You
everyone
can.
will hear about?
Not all attorneys do, and it's not always a good idea to do it because it's really about facts. So we more times than not prep clients to go on their own. It's very important for attorneys to prep the individuals. What I always start off in a prep meeting is, what are you worried about? And it's funny what people worry about and what they don't, right? And sometimes they worry about things they shouldn't, and they're all stressed out about it. And sometimes they don't worry about things they should. For example, some crimes can be barriers to you getting one of these green cards, right? Even a misdemeanor. And DUIs have been elevated into that a number of times. And one ways to look at it is a felony is a barrier. A misdemeanor of moral turpitude is as well, and also a misdemeanor of over a year in punishment. So if it's 1 year or less, that's not a big deal usually, or not a barrier. But if it's a day more than a year, it can be, and likely will be a barrier. Not paying taxes also an issue, right? So if you don't pay the taxes, that can be a problem. But if you have a payment plan, that will solve that, and it goes into your character. Um, those are the type of things that can get in the way of granting that. And then some people might not be worried about that, and then and then lying about it is really a big deal, right? So you can have been convicted of a crime that would not be a barrier to entry, and then if you say no, I wasn't convicted of a crime, I've seen people. You can tell the officer is looking at their screen. Are you sure that you weren't convicted of a crime? And the person said, no, I wasn't. They're like, well, sorry, you said no, because I know that you were. And
Right.
we're going to think you've committed fraud against us, right? And fraud is a barrier to getting a visa.
That's exactly what my next question is. What happens if we divorce during the application process or soon after the approval? And does part of that mean, John, that fraudulent charges is started if the marriage is not real?
It can be a ground for deportation if you committed fraud and then not ever be able to come back in on another visa, right? Without a waiver. There's 212 waivers and things like that you can apply for, but those are tough ones. They're not easy to get. So if you divorce during the application process, it's not always fatal to the case. You have to prove that it was done in good faith. The wedding or the marriage was in good faith, even though you got divorced, and you can do it by yourself without your spouse, and they can still get the green card. Another exception to that, without being a problem usually whatsoever for you, is if you were a victim of abuse, uh, either physical or mental, but you have to prove it. So if it's mental abuse, probably going to want to back that up. Sometimes women that are abused will go to women's shelters and things like that, and having those records, or if going to see a psychiatrist or psychologist or some sort of clinic or counselor, and bringing those records. So chronicling that by talking about the abuse is an important factor to prove that really happened. Of course, we never want to see that sort of stuff, but it does happen, and the government doesn't want to make people stay together where abuse is happening. So that's why there's that special exception that you can leave the marriage and still get your green card if you know can prove
So,
that you've been abused.
yeah, sorry, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, you're very faint, but yes, we can hear
I'm
you.
so sorry. I don't know what's going on with my. I
No,
tried
I hear
speaking
you
up
much
earlier
better
as
now.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so typically, I mean, if you do get divorced during that time, USCIS knows life happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, if it was mutual if it was a mutual divorce and you're filing for the removal conditions, you can also get a letter from your ex-spouse saying that, just kind of attesting to the fact that this relation was entered into validly. It was not for immigration purposes and stuff, so that you can submit it when you remove those conditions. We
It's
typically
far
try to
easier,
see.
in my experience, to have that go through if the divorce papers are filed after the removal of conditions document has been filed, as opposed
Yeah.
to before. Um, Matter of fact, I'm not sure you can do it if it's before the removal of conditions. Do you have any insight on that?
We do have some cases where the divorce was finalized prior to the removal of conditions. And it's just I guess you'd have to submit more documentation. They'd look at it with a lot more scrutiny than
Sure.
if it wasn't. It is it's not impossible, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay,
It's just
good.
you probably just have to see if your spouse is willing to give you a letter, or just kind of if they need to come into the interview. A lot of the times, it's just you know it's very mutual. So sometimes they're like, I don't mind coming in, and I can attest to the fact that we got married, we were fine, and then things just didn't work out, and you know officers are human too, so they'll see that as well.
Yeah. Of course, there's sometimes not mutual and complicated and ugly,
And that's when it gets a little bit, yeah, that's when you're gonna have to
Harder.
prove
one
that,
the other one won't show up. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Very well. Before we wrap up today's session, there is a question. We have someone in the audience called Kevin, and Kevin is asking, is there any way to surely approve an F1 visa? I'm assuming the question is our F1 visas, is there a way to get them like very close to certain that it's going to be approved, or is there a risk in them not being approved for some reason?
There's always a risk of getting any visa denied, and it's funny. It's a funny question, right? So F1s can get denied at the consulate. They can get denied for not having ties to your home country, which is a really, I think, horrible when that happens, and it does happen from time to time. And especially, it's weird because students are usually young. They're not always young, but they're usually young, and they're leaving home. They're leaving their parents' house. They don't have their own places, and they're going to the United States for a period of a minimum of 4 years, usually, right? So they don't have proof that they still have that. So I've seen that, but it's not common, but it does happen that they'll get turned down. So it's really hard to guarantee it. The better the ways they get denied though is probably more the way to look at this, right? If you've got an accredited university in the United States that's accepted you to be a student at that university, typically going to go through unless you have some sort of other problem, right? There's other problems, as we talked about in marriage cases, can be problems here. Convicted of crimes, be a member of an organization that's thought to be a terrorist group, which has been expanded a little bit over the years. I mean, like the Hells Angels and motorcycles groups are those now, and weren't always. There was an expansion a couple of years ago of organizations that became barriers to entry in the United States. Some diseases can exclude you from entering the United States. So any of those things can come in there. So it's really hard to say, yeah, I can guarantee you a student visa without knowing all of that sort of thing, or what the university is or it's credited. And then it says there, my question is there any surety to approve? I'm not sure what surety means. What do you mean by that?
Certainty, I'm assuming.
Yeah, surety is usually a word used in law as a bond, right? Like you pay a bond for an appeal. But I'm not sure what he means by that here, or she means. Anyway, it's tough. It's tough to give any blanket assurances on any type of visa. They take them seriously. They look at them with a hard eye. They look at the details of things and will deny things based on a sole thing being wrong sometimes. That difficultly about immigration is not it's good enough, right? You have to be look at the smallest little details. How you fill out a form. Did you give them everything they need? If you didn't give them everything they need, that one thing you're missing might be enough for them to say no. So that's why it's hard to answer that way. I don't mean to answer it like a lawyer, but I mean, the way we would look at it as a lawyer is we would look at, okay, the F1 visa, this is a student. Are there any issues in their past? Is the school accredited? Those sort of things. Okay, it says, I want to get an admission in Purdue University with setting. I strongly show my intent studying in the United States. Well, if Purdue Purdue's an accredited university, it's a good school. If they'll accept you, they're going to give you some forms like an I-20, and you'll have a CVIS, and you'll take that to your consulate and you go in. Now, it's September 20th. School's already started. They may not let you come in until closer to the spring semester. If Purdue doesn't allow you to enter until the fall semester of 2021, those are all things that are factors. But thank you for the question. But I think unless you have some of those problems in your past, you should be able to get an F1 visa to go to Purdue.
Great. And then I'm assuming that, of course, we also recommend getting an attorney hired to help with the F1 visa. Does your firm do that, John?
We do. Honestly, F1 visas are pretty simple. A lot of people don't use attorneys for that, and that's fine. The university is doing a part of the immigration process. They are going to give forms that they filled out. Now, they're not looking at everything that immigration is, right? But they have to issue forms. They have to accept this person into the university, and then they'll give a series of things to you. And then you can fill out a DS-160 on your own and set an appointment at the U.S. consulate that does F1 visas nearest to your home in your country. And then go into that on your own if you want to. If you're having problems with it, you can call us and set a strategy session, and we can talk you through it and prep you for it and do those sort of things. So there is some things we can do, but for certain visas are easier than others, and student visas are part of the simplest ones because the university is actually doing a lot of things that immigration attorneys would do in other visas.
Makes complete sense. Alrighty, very well. Thank you for your time today, John, Yesh, and Ashley. In closing, I do want to ask one more question, and it's how can people reach you for their strategy sessions, which is a much upgraded version of a consultation.
Yeah.
I've come to learn at this point.
So let me tell you a little bit about the strategy sessions you get when you call and talk to Ashley or Yesh or me or Nick, all attorneys, all licensed attorneys, all experienced attorneys. Is we look at three things. Do you qualify for a visa? We'll look at your specific facts. We'll take you through the visas.ai portal where we've broken down strategy questions for about 100 different visas, all sorts of elements of visas, right? Not just asylum cases, but asylum cases for Afghans under the OAR legislation, right? EB1s, EB1-2s, EB1-3s, all sorts of different types of visas. We've developed strategic questions, and we have collected data over 30 years on issues and responses to issues to help all of us give, I wouldn't say the exact same answers, but very similar answers. We like to do the same sort of, we have firm rules, firm strategies that we've developed over 3 decades and those sorts of things, so that we can come with a very similar response and hopefully come up with the same answer or answers and strategies that any of us would give. So that's the first thing. Then how long it would take and how much it'll cost. And then if we think we can get you a visa, we'll send a contract out to you immediately and you can sign it and pay for it. You can even finance it and we can get going on it really quickly. And then using that portal, it's collaborative, right? We'll work with you. We'll build documents within the portal. We'll send them to you within the portal. And that's why we have, a lot of quality control, and we're able to do a large number of visas. I mean, we did 89 H-1B visas in one day, because we have the ability through technology to have teams of people around the world, lawyers around the country, and do that and still maintain about a 98% approval rating across all visas, including the very, very difficult and discretionary ones for extraordinary ability.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Attorney John, Vili, Yesh, and Ashley. Also, thank you for being here. Any closing remarks from you, Ashley?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm not on the family-based side of immigration. I do exclusively employment immigration. So this was good for me. And I had a couple questions. I know we have limited time. So if we do another one on this topic, I'd be interested to get some of those answered.
Let's talk about them, Pierre, if it's okay. Let's have.
Yeah.
I love when other attorneys ask these questions because they think about them like attorneys, and sometimes clients don't have enough, analysis, or haven't been through it enough to ask the questions in the right way. So actually glad to hear.
Okay. Yeah. So I was talking to a couple recently, a real couple. They're in love. They're married. but they don't technically live together. They stay over at each other's places all the time, but for their jobs, they both work from home, so it's better for them to have their separate workspaces. So they don't technically live together. So they don't share a lease, and they also elected to keep their funds separate when they married, so they don't have a joint bank account.
Right.
And obviously they don't pay any of the utilities at the other person's apartment. And I was just wondering how a couple like that would go about proving that they're.
Yeah, it's not illegal to do it, and it makes sense if they say it. So I think you would do that. I think what we should do as attorneys is help them understand things they can do that they legally can do. It's not against the law for us to suggest, well, why don't you try this or why don't you do that? So one thing might be to set up some other accounts besides their checking account that might commingle their marital assets, right? So maybe they can they can put some money from their various paychecks into a retirement account or an investment account, or a savings account, or all of them. And that would be an element. Like, who would do that if they weren't really married, right? And obviously the more they put in there, the more likely it is that they're not faking it. You know, a $10 shared savings account isn't very impressive, but one worth a few thousand would be, right? And so that's something they could do. If they've traveled together, right? If they've met each other's families, if they, those are bona fide concepts that are good. Correspondence, right? I mean, we're in a totally digital age. Facebook posts and Instagram and emails, and that this is the digital love letters, right? I mean, you can show some of that, and why emails are great is they're time stamped, right? I mean, their relationship has gone on for a while. They've been communicating for a while, and if they're saying things to each other that what people in love say to each other, then there you have is it's hard to fake that, right? I mean, can't go back in time and do it. So yeah, they're just going to have challenges of doing other things, and I think our job is to probably give them ideas, right? Here's what other people have done and those sort of things. So that's an excellent question, Ashley. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for answering it.
Sure.
Awesome. Very well. I'm learning that it really depends on situation, right,
Yeah.
John? And at the end of the day, is it fair to say that if you're actually in love and you're actually married, it doesn't matter what dynamic you have, it's going to be maybe harder to prove, but you're not going to get denied forever. Is that accurate?
Well, unless they think you've committed fraud, right? So the problem is it's a human being making that decision, and the harder it is to persuade them. They can do it, and some of them are mean spirited, some of them can be wrong, right? And it's hard to get past the fraud finding. So I think it's always good to do everything you can do to show that. But how you go into the interview, confident but not demanding. I mean, understanding these people are decision makers in your life, and you can decide a very important thing. You don't want to tell them what to do. You want to offer things up. You want to help them understand. You want to give them examples and anecdotes, and but people are nervous, right? And they climb up and they make mistakes. I can remember a couple where very bubbly, vivacious American woman married to a very shy Mexican man, and their dynamic was she did all the talking for the family, right? So when I met with him, she would tell me everything, and he would sit there and he'd smile. He spoke English. I mean, he was conversational in it, but he was just shy. He was a very reserved guy. And so when they're in the interview, they'd ask questions to her and she would answer it, and then they'd ask questions to him and she would answer it, and she thought she was helping, right? And the adjudicator smiled and said, "Don't answer the questions for him. I need to hear from him what these answers are." And she goes, "Oh my God, I never thought of it from that perspective," right? So so I'm coaching people up on how to be, and the approach and mindset to go in is really important for lawyers to remember that we do this all the time, and this is their first time, and they're really nervous about it, and really help them focus on what to think about, how to say things. There's a million ways to skin a cat, as they say, but to focus on things that are positive and maybe not dwell on things that are not important or harmful is really an important factor in this very nuanced part of immigration law.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I think we covered quite some ground today on this conversation, and then just for us to really look forward to the next webinar. I believe I'm gonna pull up our calendar for everyone that's listening.
Yeah,
to
let's
us.
tell everybody.
So the next webinar is going to be all about E2s, E2 visa overview, what you need to know for 2025.
Oh,
No,
cool.
actually, you're going to love that because that Ashley is more into that side of immigration, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yep, that's more my speed.
She's a rock star in her fields. One of the best.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
All right.
And with that being said, if anyone watching would like to opt in to actually be on the webinar with us and speak on video, you can go to onlinevisas.com/webinar to sign up, or just contact us anywhere that you can reach us. And we'll see you next week, same time.
Thanks, Pierre. Bye.
All right. Thank you, guys. Be
Thanks.
safe.
Bye-bye.